2 of the Supreme Court ruling into 2 cases against the current UK government has ended. Third day has commenced. I keenly await what happens. I could be talking about David Cameron's memoirs and some of the knives he stuck into Gove, Johnson and May. Perhaps I'll make it a point to address that tonight on this channel, because I'm doing an early political recap tonight, 9:30 with Trups, because Trups is away tomorrow. The government's lawyer for this particular day, Sir James Eadie, has said it was not for the courts to design a set of rules over prorogation, because prorogation itself is a political matter, not a legal matter. The typical semantics argument then becoming, well, that itself was a law, therefore it can be argued as legal. On behalf of the campaigners against prorogation, the lawyer Aidan O'Neill has said it was used for an improper purpose, because instead of proroguing for up to 3 to 4 weeks, he prorogued it for 5, Boris that is. Boris's argument, and the argument he has held because of this, is that it would allow him to hold a Queen's speech in the middle of October to outline his new policies for the coming year. There is an accusation, by the way, that he is stalling for no deal. The EU themselves saying that if he doesn't present his deal or his idea by the end of the month, they will have to prepare for no deal. I'd like to see how UK MPs are going to overrule the EU on what the EU say. That could be amusing. Revocation being the only realistic option, and I don't believe Boris will do that. The majority of those who are critical of prorogation of Parliament believe it is used as a tactic to silence MPs. I'll be honest, I've stated this many times, MPs wasted time before going on holiday. How is this any different? The 2 appeals currently being heard in the Supreme Court over the 3 days, so today being the final day. The first is an appeal by Gina Miller against the decision to throw out a challenge to prorogation. The second is an appeal by the government against a separate ruling from the Edinburgh Court of Sessions that claimed that prorogation was unlawful. A senior source close to the government believes that the Supreme Court will judge that prorogation was a matter for the courts, and would then fire warning shots about how a government should use this to close Parliament illegitimately. However, another source would also claim that this would not unravel the current plan for the Queen's speech next month. It should be noted how we got here in the first place. Gina Miller launched a legal challenge, claiming it was an unlawful abuse of power. This was rejected by the judges, who said that the decision was purely political and therefore not a matter for the judiciary. I said this yesterday, but it's worth restating. A group of cross-party MPs then decided, led by Joanna Cherry of the SNP, to launch a similar case in Scotland, because if you don't get your way in one country, go to another until you get what you want. And they got the desired outcome, which has led us to the Supreme Court. The government was granted an appeal against the ruling. Both appeals are what we are currently hearing. They are being listened to by 11 judges, with yesterday being the main focus on those appealing against the original judgments. So yesterday focused on 2 sides that have won their arguments in lower courts. The government's representative argued in favour of the English court decision, saying that prorogation was a well-established constitutional function exercised by the executive, and decisions about it were squarely within that political or high policy area. Also arguing that Parliament had previously passed laws addressing aspects of prorogation, but there was no law relevant to this particular case, meaning the courts could not intervene. When asked about the need to uphold parliamentary sovereignty, Sir James also said it was a precious principle, and that phrase is too widely or generally bandied about when referring to prorogation. Lady Black, one of the judges, did ask about how Parliament could apply a check on government once it is removed from the picture due to prorogation. Sir James replied that it was inevitable and had an effect on limiting debate in Parliament, and MPs could resume their scrutiny once the suspension was over. Based on how quick the turnaround was on the Hilary Benn surrender bill, yeah, they can get stuff done in 15 days. In the afternoon session, Aidan O'Neill argued in favour of the Scottish court ruling against prorogation, saying that the decision had been carried out in bad faith, suggesting that the government should engage solely in high politics, rather than low, dishonest, dirty tricks, but given the attitude that has been taken by its advisers, and the Prime Minister to the notion of the rule of law that could not be assumed. With O'Neill adding that one of the advantages from ruling from Edinburgh was it had distance, adding a view of what all this heated debate and political machinations look like 400 miles away, far from the fever and excitement of the nation's capital and outside the Westminster bubble. Might I recommend, instead of going to Scotland, go somewhere where, I don't know, there isn't an obvious bias, perhaps Cornwall? And I do believe the judges should be able to see through it when he says that distance somehow impacts someone's perspective, because you're taking it from one heavily Remain area, London, and taking it to another equally heavily Remain area, Edinburgh. Perhaps find a place where it is exactly 50-50, and get judges that represent that. I'm sure if I took the time to go through each of the judges in turn, I'd be able to poke, and find that all of them are heavily leaning in favour of Remain. I will not be surprised if at the end of this, the judges rule in favour of Gina Miller and in favour of the Scottish courts. That would not surprise me. Not because I believe they're arguing a better case, though, but because I find it hard to believe that any judge, in this particular circumstance, will be able to remain unbiased on something that they have no real power to be involved in, i.e. prorogation. The judges, the courts, have nothing to do with this because, and I agree with the argument, that this is a political move, not a legal one. One that is and should be allowed to be exercised by the executive. Although I do think perhaps 5 weeks is too long, so, I don't know, shave a week off?